So I'm going to attempt to film 3 reviews back to back because I'm just not getting the time to do them at the moment, and I thought that I'd give it a go now, see if I can do 3. They may not all go up in, you know, quick succession, but we'll see. The first of the reviews I'm going to be doing is of the Slayer from 1982. The Slayer is probably best known for being on the Video Nasties list in the UK. It's one of the slightly more obscure titles. It's only ever gotten one release post Video Nasties era, and that was from Vipco. And the release was one of the ones that was put in this new packaging after Vipco went bust. I mean, you can see it's still a Vipco disc. But that's the only DVD of it anywhere in the world. So the movie was directed by J.S. Cardone and stars Sarah Kendall as Kay, an artist who suffers a series of nightmares, all involving this one location and this one specific monster chasing after her. Her husband, as well as her in-laws, her brother-in-law and sister-in-law, all go away on holiday. They're trying to take her mind off of it. And it turns out that she recognises the place. I'm sure you can see where this is going. And yeah, eventually this near deserted island becomes the stage upon which the members of this group will be slaughtered by this slayer that she sees in her nightmares. So it's kind of a simple plot. It's got to be said, it is pretty paper thin really in a lot of ways. This movie, the film it really echoes to me is Anthropophagus. You know, the George Eastman, Joe D'Amato movie, where a group of tourists arrive on a desolate Greek island and are killed by this monstrous cannibal. This has got a very similar vibe to that, you know, this group of people on, you know, a near deserted island where they get picked off one by one over the course of a short period of time. I've got to say, it doesn't quite come off as well as Anthropophagus though. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like Anthropophagus. I do. I think it's a good movie. It does what it does pretty much perfectly. This movie, it's not as extreme and kind of as bad taste as Anthropophagus, which kind of is the thing that would possibly help this movie somewhat. It's got quite a good atmosphere though, much like Anthropophagus itself. This movie does cultivate a good atmosphere. It's shot well, it's got a good general vibe about it that really makes it a suitably tense experience, I've got to say. It's got a little bit of a helping of gore in there, and I do enjoy some of the gore. It's not all brilliant. I mean, I've got to be honest, some of the gore scenes are pretty funny actually. One of the deaths in this movie is fucking hilarious. There's a dude who is exploring the house, and he goes up into the attic and he sort of sticks his head through the hatch, and the hatch kind of closes on his head and his head ends up cut off by the hatch, and he's like fucking, his body's dangling below and all this shit. And then that's followed up by a scene where the main character, it's her boyfriend or husband or whatever it happens to, and Kay goes and finds his body and he's in bed and she kisses him on the lips, and then when she pulls the duvet back, it's just a head with all the blood coming out and shit. And it turns out that's just a dream. But I mean, that sort of thing is pretty entertaining, not necessarily in a good way, but it is entertaining nonetheless. I've got to say, overall, the biggest problem that this movie has is just that it's quite generic. There's really nothing to separate this from a million other kind of slasher type movies that you will have seen doubtless a million times. I definitely find the idea at the centre of this movie about this woman's kind of nightmares echoing the future really interesting. I think that's kind of a cool idea, these kind of premonitions of something evil that's going to happen that kind of doesn't seem like it can be avoided. I really like that. I feel like that's a cool idea to incorporate into the film, and I do give the movie credit for that, because that's a cool little plot device. Gonna spoil the ending here, so if you don't want to hear that, skip to this time mark. So when the movie ends, she's the last woman standing, the final girl or whatever. The monster comes for her and attacks her. The Slayer attacks her. She wakes up on Christmas morning as a tiny little child. Turns out it was all just a nightmare. and her brother announces that she's being given a pet cat, and shows her this cat. Now that's a reference to earlier in the film when her brother mentions that she was given a cat as a child, and a few days later it was found dead. Sort of, you know, talking about this sort of state of this girl's mental health and why her dreams shouldn't necessarily be given much heed. And you know, the little girl lies in bed looking horrified at this, obviously remembering what she's seen in the dream. I've got to say, whilst I can't necessarily rubbish the ending entirely, because dreams and nightmares are a part of the plot at large, that ending still feels like a bit of a cop-out. The whole "I awoke and it was all a dream" thing, you know, it does all feel a little bit childish and a bit of a cop-out, even if the movie does deal with that sort of thing beforehand. Maybe it's just that I've been conditioned to think that way, and that if I went into it, you know, without any sort of bias against that type of ending, I would say, yeah, that's a pretty cool ending. But this ending is pretty much, you know, awesome and stupid in equal measure, I've got to say. It's quite a mixed feeling that I have about it as a whole. It does feel like a cop-out, but I can see why they went with that as an ending. Like I say, the problem with this movie really is that it's just a movie that it feels like I've seen a lot of times before. It doesn't really bring anything particularly new to the table. It's quite a well-made movie, and it's not, you know, offensive to watch. There's nothing that's gonna kind of turn you off of it massively. It's just that the movie doesn't really have anything interesting going on, and the only really interesting thing that it tries, i.e. the ending, doesn't really come off that well, you know. So I mean, overall I'm going to give the Slayer a 6 out of 10. I definitely think that you should check it out if this is your type of thing, if you're into the whole sort of slasher movie idea. If you like Anthropophagus, give this a go. It's definitely not the worst movie you'll ever see. I do worry that I'm missing the point a little bit with it. So if you've seen this and you think that this is an awesome classic of a movie, please let me know. Because, like I say, it does feel a little bit like I'm missing something. But for me, overall, I've got to say 6 out of 10 I think is a fair score for this movie. It's got all the good nuts and bolts of a well-made movie. It's definitely fun in places, but it does suffer from being generic, and the ending does let it down a fair bit. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. If you look in the description, you will see a link to my podcast. Please go and check that out. It's all about music. It's fantastic. Also, if you want to be extra awesome, go down to my Amazon wish list and buy me something off of it. And I will definitely talk about it on the channel if you do that. Thanks very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen.